When you look at all these people through history that have made money, lost money, etc., generated great wealth, are there like certain strategies they've deployed? Because when I think of like Warren Buffett, I'm like, okay, so he like compounded for like 80 years, blah, 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 invested. He was an investor. Then you've got this other strategy, which might be entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Some incredible company like Elon Musk making SpaceX or Tesla. Do you have it distilled down into a set of different strategies that are often deployed to equal wealth?
I think if there's one big one that is applicable to ordinary people, you can come up with like different marketing things, but like that's not going to apply to me or you. One thing that sticks out that is a common denominator that virtually everyone listening to this could learn from is they were way more patient and had way more endurance and kept it going for longer than anyone else. David Senra, who's a great podcaster, right? So he has a podcast called Founders. He said this one time. He was like, he hears from entrepreneurs who are like, man, I listened to your podcast. I'm a founder. I have a company, and I'm going to sell my company next year. I'm going to sell it to Google. And David's like, did you learn anything from the historical entrepreneurs of Rockefeller or Steve Jobs or Bill Gates? Those people ran their companies for 50 years. They ran their companies until they died, kind of thing. These are not people who are looking to be like, I'm going to create a company and then sell it. I'm going to start another company and then sell it. They keep it going for as long as they possibly can. The big wealth usually does not come. It almost never comes from like a great idea that just surges out of the middle of nowhere. It's usually like a pretty good idea that you can keep going for 40 years or 50 years. That's where the big money comes from. If Rockefeller, I wrote this in the book, 99.9% of Warren Buffett's net worth was accumulated after his 60th birthday. So like when Warren Buffett was 60, he was worth $2 billion, like an incredible amount of money. He could have sold then and he sold everything and retired and had an absolutely amazing life. The reason that he has accumulated, if you count the money he's given away, $250 billion, is because he kept it going. So now he's 93 years old and he's still going. Same with, Bill Gates could have sold Microsoft in the 1970s and made $10 million and had a great little life.
Yeah.
But he kept it going and kept it going. Yahoo offered Mark Zuckerberg $1 billion cash. And he was like 19 at the time. And he said, no, I'm going to keep doing this thing. That's the common denominator that ordinary people can learn from, is like endurance and longevity is usually where the big wealth is made.
Endurance.
Keep it going.
Endurance is hard.
Yeah. Larry Ellison, who was the founder of Oracle, did an interview in the 1990s. And they asked him about Bill Gates, who was a friend but also rival back then. And Larry Ellison was like, the secret to Bill Gates, yes, he's very smart, but there's a lot of smart people out there. And he was like, no offense, but there's a lot of people smarter than Bill Gates out there. But nobody has more endurance than Bill Gates. He will outwork you every single time. You cannot, he'll keep it going for as long as he needs to keep it going to beat you. And that's his skill. It's not intelligence, it's endurance.
On this point of perseverance, why is perseverance so key? Like if we break it down into what's actually happening when you persevere.
I think it's two things. It's one, in any endeavor that's going to pay off, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be there's going to be more roadblocks and speed bumps and collapses than you want. It's absolutely inevitable. The unofficial model at NVIDIA, the giant chip company, is one of the most valuable companies in the world, is we are always 30 days from going out of business. Now, they're not. It's one of the most successful companies in the world, but they understand what is true for every business, which is that business is hard. Like every business is a knife fight. Every company that you own or start is going to be very difficult. And you need the perseverance to get through that. That's one element. The other is compound interest. That's what builds wealth. What compound interest is and why it is so powerful, like the people who get rich from it are not the people who earn very high returns. It's people who earn good returns for a long period of time. Like all compound interest is, it's returns to the power of time. And if you remember like 8th grade math, that exponent, like time, that's doing all the heavy lifting in there. And so in investing, if you can be good, merely good, or if you can just be average for an above average period of time, you do phenomenal. And this is like the most misunderstood thing about investing. Most investors are like, how do I earn the highest returns? I want to make the best investments, highest returns. And you can do well doing that. You're much more likely to do well if you're like, hey, I just want average returns, but I want to be so durable and have so much endurance that I can earn average returns for 40 years. And if I can be average for 40 years, I'm going to end up in the top 1%.
How do you make that real for someone listening who's making $1,000 a month disposable income. So they've got $1,000 to play with a month potentially. How if they've never heard about this idea of compounding interest before and the magic that it can create if left to its own devices for a long enough period of time, what is the simple way to show them the power of it?
So take index funds, which are just a very simple collection of businesses at a very low fee. You can buy one stock, but it's a collection of hundreds and hundreds of different businesses. You own Apple and Amazon and Coca-Cola. You own all the companies in the world. And so it's the most boring, bland, average way to invest. If you invest in that in a very simple way, and you do that consistently for 20 or 30 years, with no skill, with no expertise, where you're not getting stock tips from anyone, it's the most boring way to invest. If you do it consistently for 30 years, you will almost certainly end up in the top 1% of investors. You will almost certainly beat literally 95% of Wall Street pros who were trying to outsmart the market, trying to outwit the market, and were unable to keep it going for 30 years. And so this is where if you can just be average for an above average period of time, you'll be amazing. I mean, it's probably similar in health that if you want to be healthy, yes, you can go out and become the best bodybuilder in the world, the best marathon runner in the whole world. But actually, if you just work out, just modest workouts a couple times a week for 30 years, you're going to be one of the healthiest people in your town. If you can work out 2 or 3 times a week for 30 years consistently and eat a good diet consistently for 30 years, you'll be one of the healthiest people that you know. And it's the same in investing. It's like the people who do the best are not the geniuses. It's the people who are ordinary for a very long period of time.
I was thinking about a very simple example. So there's a coffee in my cup today, and the coffee might cost $5. Now, with the laws of compounding returns, if I don't have that coffee
Yep.
today, in 40 years, if I got 8%, which is, I think the S&P 500 gives about 8%,
Yep.
then in 40 years' time, instead of the coffee that I had every day, with an 8% interest return, I would have $440,000.
If you did a coffee every day.
Yes.
Yes.
Assuming the coffee costs $5.
Now, I like coffee. You do too. I don't want people to listen to that and say I should stop drinking my coffee, but it's a powerful example. There's a book called The Snowball, which is kind of the most detailed biography of Warren Buffett. And it would talk about how when he was on his adulthood, he wouldn't want to get haircuts because in his mind, a haircut would cost $10,000 because it was a $2 haircut. But if he invested that money in the way that he knew he could and leave it alone for 50 years, whatever it would be, he didn't want to get a car wash because he would tell his wife, he's like, that's a $5,000 car wash. She's like, what do you mean? It costs $1. She's like, no. But if I invest that money and leave it alone. So he was always thinking about not what something costs today, but what he could grow that money into in the future.
I was just thinking about Warren Buffett getting his haircuts. So I thought, how old's Warren Buffett now? He's
93.
Okay, so let's say for 80 years, if Warren Buffett didn't get a $5 haircut and instead put it somewhere in the S&P 500, an index fund, which by the way, you can invest in on your phone. 80 years later, Warren Buffett would have 10.3 million.
That's it. And that's why he's worth $250 billion today, is because you go through 90 years of thinking like that. And it really adds up. Now, you always have to preface this by being like, please drink your coffee and get a haircut. It's always a balance, but also understand how incredible it can be by doing very ordinary things for a long period of time can lead to magic.
It is magic as well. That's such a perfect word for it because it seems
it's magic because it's not intuitive at all.
Yes.
You don't understand it. You're like, wait, what? I can't understand how a haircut can turn into $10 million.
Yeah.
It's not intuitive. Like we're not, there's a great example from my friend, Michael Batnick. He said, if I ask you, what is 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8? You can figure that out in your head quickly. But if I said, what is 8 times 8 times 8 times 8 times 8? Forget about it. Can't do it. We're not made to think exponentially. We're not meant to think in multiplicative terms.
Because nothing was exponential once upon a time.
That's largely true, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I can't think of anything that was really exponential before.
Yeah, I'm sure we could come up with a couple examples in nature and whatnot. There's lots of compounding in nature, and that's kind of the core of evolution, is like things building upon each other over time.
Oh yeah, maybe brushing your teeth or decay.
Yeah,
would be considered to be
but
exponential.
certainly the stock market is the most pertinent example in most people's lives. But there's also a lot of like bad habits compound. You know, smoking one cigarette is not that big a deal. Smoking one cigarette every day for 30 years, big deal. Smoking 2 packs a day for 30 years, big deal.
Mhm.
So there are things that like in small doses, they're not that big a deal. But if you do them consistently for a long period of time, it leads to negative magic.
So what's your view then on saving money? You're working on a book currently which is being released in October this year called The Art of Spending Money.
Yeah.
What's your view on saving money? You told me to have the coffee, cut my hair.
Yeah. I view savings as well, one thing that most people view saving money as like as idle saving. Like if you're not spending it, it's just sitting in the bank doing nothing. And it's just kind of it's just wasted money sitting there. I've never viewed it like that at all. I view savings as little tokens of independence. And every dollar that I save is a little piece of my time in the future that I own and I control. It's just deferred spending. And I view that as independence. So if you have a lot of savings, it's not just like hoarding money and I'm not going to do anything with it. And it's not even that I'm saving this money so that I can spend it in the future. If I save a dollar today, I have a dollar more independence today. I benefit from that today, right now. Like I feel more independent because of it. And I am more independent because of it. So I view, again, my top financial goal by far, and I think this is true for most people, whether they know it or not, what they really want out of money is independence and autonomy and just being able to do things on their own terms, live the life that they want to live. And I view like the oxygen of independence is savings.
And what's the opposite of that? Is it debt?
Debt. Yeah, debt is a piece of your future that somebody else owns. It's the polar opposite of it. When you go into debt, you're saying 3 years from now, this company owns a part of my time. They own my labor in the future. And savings is the opposite. Savings is in the future. I have this stored up. I have this consumption stored up in the future. I can do whatever I want with it.
I think, you've written a book called The Psychology of Money, but as you were talking there, I was thinking, gosh, this is all psychology again, because at the heart of this, we all have our own unique relationship with money.
Yeah,
And there's lots of people that won't even look at their own bank statements. They
right,
won't look at their own Revolut or Monzo app in the
right.
morning. They avoid their credit cards in terms of like their credit card statements. And to even start talking about these subjects of saving and spending, we probably need to preface it with some kind of like mindset or mentality towards your relationship with money.
Yep. I think the most important is there are 2 topics in life that will impact you whether you like them or not. That's health and money. It doesn't matter if you're not interested in those topics. Those topics are interested in you and they will impact your life. You can have a wonderful life not knowing anything about chemistry or meteorology if you don't care about those topics. You cannot have a good life if you don't care about money and health. And that's true for everybody everywhere. And so I think everyone has an obligation to understand their own relationship with money. Now, some people are going to be, fanatics about it, and other people just view money as just kind of like a necessary tool that they need to get through life. But you have to understand how it works and what it's doing to you financially and psychologically. And so much of modern ills have to do with envy, jealousy, feel like you're falling behind relative to other people. The core of that is usually financial. And so even if you're not the kind of person who's like, I don't care about the stock market and like, I don't really care that much about money. I like having fun with my friends. That's great. But there's a huge component of sociology and just what's going on in the world all the time that is financial. And I think money is like such an interesting window into people's lives. You can learn so much about somebody if you understand what they do with their money, how they think about money, how much they talk about money, how much they want to show off, how much attention they're putting into their clothes and their cars and their jewelry to show other people how much money that they have. You learn so much about someone's psychology. If I learned about your politics, I don't know what they are, but if I learned about your politics, I might learn something about you. But if I sat down and I said, tell me everything about your money, tell me how much you make, how much you spend, what do you value, what do you want to do? I'd learn so much about your personality.
In your work on the psychology of money, how much did you think about trauma as a protagonist in the story of one's financial relationships?
I think less about trauma. That's a component of it, but more so it's just that we are all prisoners of our unique past. No matter what that is. That's trauma for a lot of people, different forms of trauma, but you grew up in a different country than I did. You have different parents than I do, different values. We're slightly different ages. And so you saw a different side of the world than I did. And that taught you different values. It taught you to aspire to different things than I did. And you and I, in a lot of ways, are a lot alike. I think if we sat down and like talked about broader topics, we'd agree on 90% of things, but we are different. And so we shouldn't pretend that what I want to do with my money is what you should do. And I think a lot of times when people argue about money and they're like, "Oh, you're investing wrong," or you're spending, you're not spending enough, you're spending too much. It's not actually people disagreeing with each other. It's people who came from very different backgrounds talking over each other, and they just have different aspirations for what you want to do. So everyone is so different, and they're a prisoner of their past. My brother-in-law is a social worker, and I may have brought this up the first time I was on your podcast, but I think about it all the time. And in social work, when you're working with very disadvantaged kids, a lot of those kids who are homeless and foster children behave very poorly at school. They do very poorly. Their grades are terrible in school. They're always getting in fights. And he said, as a social worker, he said, we have a saying in social work. It is, all behavior makes sense with enough information. So you look at this child who is getting into fights on the playground and failing all of his classes. And it's easy for the teacher to be like, what's your problem? This is not that hard. Just behave. Just stop doing this. And then you look at what that kid's going through at home. Maybe their parents are beating them. Maybe they're foster children, they're orphans. Once you piece together what's going on in their life, you're like, I kind of understand. All behavior makes sense with enough information. And I think you can apply that to a lot of areas in life, money especially, where you're like, you see someone driving a yellow Lamborghini, there's a story there about someone's past. I'm not judging it, but there's a story in there of someone being like, I want people to know how much money I made. And it's not a criticism, but there's a story. There's something that happened in your life that led you to there. And we all have, that's not a criticism, because I have bits of my past that influence how I manage money today too. So just recognizing that there's no one right answer. In math, 2 + 2 is 4 for me and you. There is a right answer. Money's not like that. We're all just kind of trying to figure out what works given the lens that we see the world through.
This is a bit of a bizarre question, but it had me thinking as you were speaking about mortality as it relates to money, because one of the perspectives on money is YOLO.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I'm only going to live once, so
Yeah.
I might as well have a good time. I think I definitely have more of a bias in that direction, although I'm not fully in that direction. And my brother, who's a year older than me, is one that gave me your book and has worked as a stockbroker, an actuarial scientist. At 12 years old, he was budgeting his pocket money on an Excel document, whereas I was just spending. And he thinks much more long term. He's like investing in his pension at 21.
Yeah.
Whereas I was like at the casino, not the literal casino, a figurative casino. I
Yeah.
was taking bigger risks and just rolling the dice. And my somewhat illogical way of rationalizing my behavior and not investing as much in my pension was, I'm only going to live once anyway, so I might as well just enjoy my life.
Yeah.
And when we talk about the coffees and saving and all this stuff, a lot of people will be thinking, yes, but compounding's fine, but I want to
Enjoy life.
enjoy life.
I think about a thing when I was in my early 20s at this point, and there was a coworker of mine, and he was I don't know, 10 years older than me, and he had $25,000 of credit card debt, which I could not fathom at the time. That was such an incomprehensible amount of credit card debt that he was paying 17% interest on. And at the time, I just thought, and all the debt came from trips that he had taken. He traveled Europe and traveled through Asia and had a great time doing it, but he put it all on his credit card. At the time, I remember thinking, you idiot, do you understand what this is going to do to your future? And then he died when he was about 32.
Wow.
And then I remember thinking, like, I'm so glad you took those trips. I'm so glad you went into that credit card debt, because the truth was that at age 32, he had seen more and done more than most people would at age 62. And so I think about that a lot, of like, it's always a balance. And the truth is that you and I don't know, are we going to live until we're 110 or die tomorrow? Nobody knows, of course. One thing I think a lot about as a parent is that I've been a big saver my entire life. Since I got my first job at age 16, I've saved the majority of what I've made in every job that I've ever been in. And it would be easy to look at someone like me and say, Morgan, if you were on your deathbed tomorrow, you'd probably regret the vacations you didn't take and the dinners you didn't have, right? You'd regret that. My answer is absolutely not, because if I was on my deathbed tonight, I would take so much joy knowing that my wife and kids are going to be okay because of what I saved. That would be the worst situation I would be in, is on my deathbed and looking at my wife and kids and knowing you guys are screwed. I'm leaving you debt, you know? And so, but that might change as I get older. And so when my kids are hopefully financially self-sufficient, will I still think that? You know, will I still have that need to be like, I need to work and save to provide for my young kids. That's not going to last forever. So it'll change throughout your life.
That is literally the worst thought in the world, isn't it? To think that you could be on your deathbed and look over at your family and know that they're about to struggle with bills and
Yeah.
with food, and they're probably going to have to sell the house, and their lifestyle's completely going to change when you go. I don't even have kids yet, but I was just thinking about my partner being stood
There's
there
no
outside.
worse nightmare than that. I think there's an opposite of that, which is in several of the books and studies that have been done on dying, there are quite a few people who have very peaceful deaths, people who know they're going to die of terminal illness, and they're pretty much at ease with it. And when you dig into like what is those people's psychology? How do you know you're going to die in 6 months and you're kind of at ease with it? One of the big factors is knowing that your family's going to be okay without you
Mm.
because they are sufficient and they don't rely on you for wisdom and advice as much as they can take care of themselves. But the opposite, if you're on your deathbed and you're like, my children, my spouse is going to have a real hard time without me, that's the most painful thing you can imagine.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.